Hi everyone, welcome to another Toy Guys Talking, and today I'm joined by Jared, aka RetroToyPile on Instagram and on Facebook. Jared, how you doing today?
Good, Michael. How you doing?
Very good. And you've got quite a following on your Instagram.
I do. Originally, I just wanted a place to kind of take some cool toy photos and store them and share them with other people in the toy community. And it kind of just grew and snowballed into something, and now I think I'm up to maybe 13,000 followers, something like that.
Lucky number 13.
Yeah, and I appreciate every one of them.
Do you remember like when you first started? What did you start posting originally?
My first post was in 2015, and it was a picture of my Masters of the Universe sealed slime vat.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I wanted to make an impact by, putting something cool out there that, you may not have seen before, especially sealed. So I wanted to see how many likes I would get. And at the time, I didn't really understand how, Instagram worked. I didn't know how hashtags worked. So I had no idea what I was doing. I was just taking pictures. The lighting was terrible. And I just threw something up there to see if somebody would, contact me and say, hey, man, let's talk about your toys and stuff. And, I realized quickly that you had to have a following for people to appreciate what you were posting. So I just said, well, I'll just take pictures of stuff and post them periodically, and we'll see what happens. And once I figured out the whole hashtag thing, it turned into something that I really enjoyed doing. And, here we are.
Yeah, so, you got some awesome pictures on there, and I'm actually just going to grab my laptop, and take a quick. I was looking at it. I look at it regularly, but just for today's chat, I really like the extra little touches that you add to some of the pictures, which is what I like to do too.
Yep.
Because these things are magical, but sometimes they just need a little bit of that movie or cartoon magic. So I see the hero.
Yes.
Is that a natural lens flare effect, or
No, that's a iPhone touch of wizardry there.
But the important thing is it looks natural. Like it. That's the thing I like about some of your effects, that it's hard to tell that you've played around with it. It looks like it should have been in the first place, basically.
Right, and that's kind of what I strive for. I am not a photographer. I do all of this on my iPhone. I have the 8 Plus, which is probably the most common iPhone. It's not the newest. It's not the latest, greatest. And as I said before, I'm not a photographer. Just a guy with toys. I like to play around with different lighting, different backgrounds, and I usually maybe 25 to 30 shots before I get the one that I think I'm going to post.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I'll throw some filters on there just to see what it looks like. But I very rarely put like a lens flare, but with that hero, I just felt it needed something spectacular. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just did one of Chris Star.
Yeah, I saw that.
Earlier. And the one without any effects, I think he looks fantastic. But his whole gimmick is he's the Crystal Man. So I played around with it for the one I just posted, with everything is gleaming and flaring, and I'm like, yeah, that's just perfect. And I love the backgrounds that you use on a lot of your figures, like the Sugar Bear one with the pink background and Captain Crunch with the green.
Yep.
How do you decide what color goes behind the figure, if it's just going to be like a one color or a gradient background behind them?
Well, I kind of hinted at it earlier. Jokingly, I said that I had OCD. That's partially mostly
OCD.
Mostly OCD. Not to the point where it's
I've got a little bit.
And I have a little bit too.
I've got a tiny bit.
It's an attention to detail that I take pride in. So let's put it that way.
I also, like, all joking aside, I prefer to refer to it as because it's a term that is like an actual clinically diagnosed term, and I think a lot of people throw it out there, and it's I've always looked at it as an attention to detail and like a commitment to excellence.
Agreed. I would agree with that. That's a good way to sum it up. Absolutely. Anyway, regarding the backgrounds, it's really a random pull of the cardstock that I have. I have a stack of different colored cardstocks that I get at a regular craft store. Usually they're, I don't know, 10 by 11 or something like that. As far as the colors, it's, you might notice that I kind of cluster everything together. So you might know, like with the Captain Crunch, for example, several of those posts in a row were solid, bright neon colors. And I like to kind of put that on the wall so that they can kind of be seen together.
Yeah.
And there's some others that I have where they're like washed watercolor type backgrounds. So I just did a recent run of photos with some Joes, and they all had some watercolor backgrounds. So there's really no rhyme or reason to it, but I try to put contrast in there so that the figure doesn't get lost in the background. I want it to pop. So if I'm posting something that's blue, very rarely will I use a blue background. I would just put I put something that's just going to make it, stand off the page.
Yeah. And they remind me a lot of the old catalog pictures. Those old toy photographers really knew how to make those figures pop too. So
sure. Yeah.
They're all really fun and very cheerful. And I wanted to ask you about, sometimes you do like a collage of them where it's several individual pictures make up a big picture.
Yes.
Like the turtles. You had 2, 4, looks like 6 of them make up the 4 Ninja Turtles. How much does it suck when you post a new picture and the whole thing shifts and they're not lined up anymore?
It's terrible. And what I tried to do at first was I said, okay, when I post the turtles, the next time I post something, I'm going to have to post a series of 3 pictures until it gets down far enough in the feed where you won't notice it anymore.
Yeah.
And that was a tough week because I try to post regularly enough to, maybe once a day. So that week I was really struggling because now I had to come up with 3 good photos per day.
Yeah.
And it was very tough on me. So I quickly decided, I said, well, I'm scrapping this idea. It looks cool. And in theory, I think it adds a little something to your feed, but it's very difficult to keep up with. You know? If I had more time, I'd probably stick with it because I do love the way that those come out, but it's not something I can do regularly.
I agree. Sure. I tried one of those a long time ago before I was ever even doing toy-related pictures on my Instagram, because I saw someone do it and I thought, that's an awesome idea.
It is. It's really cool.
But as soon as you get that, even if it's 3 pictures, or if it's 2 and they get shoved off, I'm like, it's a cool effect, but it's kind of one of those things where it's for people who don't post regularly. If you post once a month.
And that's what I quickly figured out. And there was actually some, believe it or not, that I deleted because it was driving me bananas.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if that's going to look terrible, when it's halfway down my feed, I'm just going to get rid of those photos anyhow, So that's how badly I wanted it to work, but it didn't pan out. So
You're wearing a KB America's Toy Store T-shirt. That's
correct.
Was that your toy store of choice when you were a kid?
Yes, it was.
Oh, that's cool.
I spent a lot of time at the mall, and that's typically where you'd find a KB store. I'm sure they had standalone stores or strip mall type stores, but in my area, there were several that were actually in the mall. So it was just, I think, easy access for me. I can remember in the early 90s buying a lot of toys, like the Hasbro WWF figures in particular, Ninja Turtles, things like that. And all that stuff came from KB. I mean, I was in there probably twice a week. It was, I'm from Massachusetts, so we have a lot of cold weather here, as I'm sure you're familiar with in Canada.
Yeah. It snowed once or twice here.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, this week.
Oh, really? We haven't had snow yet, but it's coming, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, so a lot of winter activity, especially when you're that age, you don't have a car, that kind of thing. Your parents drop you off at the mall, and I'd always duck into KB, pick up a Ninja Turtle or a wrestler or something like that, go down to the arcade and spend the rest of my money there.
Yeah.
But yeah, KB was definitely my. It saddened me more to see KB close than it did to see Toys R Us. Nothing against Toys R Us.
Well, Toys R Us had their run. Toys R Us had a good run. I mean, you know, we still have it here in Canada, and we got very lucky here because it improved. The Toys R Us we have here today, I would say, is the Toys R Us of maybe not 30 years ago, but maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Like it's
Really?
good. It's really, really good and fun. So Canadians can't really complain, but it had a pretty good run. Toys R Us did. KB just felt like, you know, it was on the chopping block before it really, you know, I guess it had an okay run too, but it went a lot sooner than Toys R Us did.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it turned into, what was it? Toy Works, or KB Toy Works, and then Toy Works.
Yeah.
And then closed shortly after that. So anytime, you know, a company's changing its name and hyphenating its name and then chopping it up, it's you know, usually the beginning of the end.
Yeah, we never had Toys R Us growing up here. It's kind of funny. In my particular area, it was, as far as toy stores go, and it's probably a big reason why I'm such a toy enthusiast, is we had giant toy stores here in my area. Like the toy store in our highway market, as it was called. This was like kind of a prototype, a precursor to those giant Walmarts that are all over the place now, with the groceries, department store, cut your hair, get food, electronics, toys. And our toy section in that highway market was one of the biggest they say in Canada and maybe even in North America.
Oh, wow.
So that's the one I grew up on. And then 2 blocks over, they built a Toys R Us in '86. So I went from that to that, and some of the little smaller department stores had their little toy sections. But to me, if you wanted toys, it was those giant ones. And we never had KB or really anything like that in my area, in a mall, like a little insert toy store.
Right.
If there was, no one would have went, because they would have said, well, just go to Highway Market or Toys R Us. Like, what is this tiny little thing? But I still remember the first time I ever walked into a KB, and it was magic. Even though it was a smaller store in a mall, my wife has family in Sarnia, Ontario, which is right across from the border in Port Huron, Michigan. So we took the trip into the States and going into the mall, and man, walking into that KB toy stores, it was, I guess for the wrestling fans out there, the way to describe it is if you grew up just watching WWF and Hulk Hogan and Piper, but you always heard about Ric Flair and Lex Luger and those guys from NWA in the magazines, but you never saw them. That's what it was like for me, actually walking into a real live KB, which I'd heard about my whole life. And it wasn't just a toy store. It was awesome. It was magic. And seeing those Spider-Man Classics exclusives, the Ben Reilly and the Spider-Man 2099, oh, you better believe I got them that day, because I was like, you can't get these. There was no eBay back then, right? So yes, thank you, KB.
Good for
awesome.
you. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. They had a lot of they had some Toy Biz X-Men exclusives and 2-packs and things like that that were exclusive to KB. So yeah, it was a great store. Like you said, it was smaller, but I think it packed just as much of a punch for me, if not more, than Toys R Us.
And the particular one that I went to, I think it had a lot of older stock too, which was, again, like in the 90s, really, well, I guess it would have been the early 2000s when I saw, but it felt like there were toys there that were almost 10 years old still there. Like some of the stuff wasn't being sent back as it usually is, like in a clearance section.
Sure.
So that's always been a really fun part of visiting toy stores for me too, going to the unsold part and looking for that bargain and getting like RoboCop and the Ultra Police, $2.99.
I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was another great memory of KB Toys. And for people in the GTA area here in Southern Ontario, Canada, there is actually a chain of toy stores that are almost exactly like KB. They're called Toys, Toys, Toys. So they're in the big malls around Toronto. And if you Google it, look up some pictures or some videos. I guess there's walkthrough videos of Toys, Toys, Toys. If you want a little bit of a time warp, maybe check those out, because when I go into a Toys, it's been years since I have, but when you go through there, it's a KB basically in everything but name. It's the same type of layout, and you got your older toys, and super fun store.
Cool. Toys. All right.
What do you do these days for toys? Online or brick and mortar?
I haven't. Most of my toys are actually vintage, in use. So a lot of my purchases come from flea markets, believe it or not.
Yeah, I noticed right beside your head as you're saying that you got the new Super 7 Man at Arms.
Oh, where? No, I don't. I do not.
Well, that's not Man at Arms?
Where are you looking?
The crystal, the see-through He-Man?
Oh no, that's my crystal He-Man that I made. I do custom figures as well.
Oh, sorry. I thought that
That's
was
okay.
the crystal Man at Arms, but that's a custom.
Yes, that is a custom. That's a regular He-Man sculpt.
Oh, beautiful.
The vintage He-Man, and I've made there's several featured actually on my Instagram page. I do Horde Troopers, I do Hordak, Skeletor, He-Man, Spikor. Yeah, all those.
I'm really interested in clear figures. Like when it comes to customs or even official releases of remolds, repaints, clear figures really interest me. So, because I love Crystar. Picked up a see-through Tigra a few years ago from Thundercats, vintage Tigra, but just see-through Ninjaga too.
Were they customs?
Yeah, off of eBay.
Yeah?
Just
Cool.
custom casts. But
Sure.
what are some of the other clear customs you've done, if any?
Well, just about every figure that I've done a clear version. Like clear Skeletor, He-Man, Hordak. The only one I haven't done crystal clear is Spikor. I've done versions of him in blue, dark blue, ice blue, pink, colors like that. I made a purple one. I've only made one purple one. And it went to Justice Curry. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He's okay.
He's a big YouTube star. Everyone's heard of Justice Curry.
He is. He's a great guy. I made. I think at some point I told him that I didn't want to make him a purple Spikor because I just thought that was a boring color. So I showed him a bunch of other ones, and he really wanted the purple, and I made a purple one for him, and it came out fantastic. But that is the only purple one I've ever made, and it went to him for his chandelier because he's got a clear figure collection that he hangs from his ceiling, and so I'm happy to say that one of my figures made it there.
How much work goes into, and what's the process if you don't mind sharing it? If it's a trade secret, no problem.
No, there's no. I wouldn't say it's a trade secret. I mean, there's plenty of. I taught myself how to do it. The internet's a powerful tool. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of YouTube videos, not necessarily for toy making, but for resin casting in general. How to use the materials properly and, to get the best results and that kind of thing. So in a nutshell, I would first disassemble a figure. So you need you need a sacrificial lamb for that. And then
before you go on, what's the most heartbreaking figure you had to do it to make another one of?
I ruined 3 vintage Horde Troopers.
Give us a moment here. Bow our heads.
Yeah. Three vintage Horde Troopers were sacrificed for the molding for my Horde Trooper, which actually turned out I needed 16 different molds for that figure alone.
Wow.
Each piece. I mean, if you've ever held a vintage Horde Trooper, there's a lot of moving parts. And so if you could just picture each moving part has a mirror image, the piece that holds his arm joints together. That's actually 2 pieces that Mattel sonic welded together. Well, now I have to split that piece in half magically so that I can make something that goes together like it was intended to go together in the first place. So that was a tough one. That was a very tough. That was the hardest figure I've ever done, but by far the coolest end results. In fact, on my Instagram page, on my story highlights, I think the first couple are actually some Horde Troopers. I had different colors that I did, but that was heartbreaking. I destroyed 3 of them.
Oh, and you were going through the process before I jumped in?
So in a nutshell, you have to basically disassemble a figure, and there's different ways to do that. For example, with mine, I chose not to split the torso in half to get those 2 pieces. I chose to basically plug the neck and the waist holes so that I could mold a solid torso. The reason I did that is because when the clear resin cures, I cure it in a pressure pot so that it eliminates virtually all the bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt that using a solid one-piece torso would get me the best end result, and it did. But there are some casters that choose to do just like Mattel did, they choose to split it in half, which is fantastic because, first of all, splitting a torso without destroying it is, that's an art in itself.
Yeah.
So you could say I took the easy way out, but
Well,
certainly...
I would prefer your method, honestly. I would prefer it to the original way it was done, just because less likely to break, probably, and probably looks better without the seams.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Again, and I've seen some very clean work. There's a lot. I'm not the only guy who does this. In fact, I'm probably one of the newest guys on the scene. Certainly not the first to do it. Certainly not the last. But for me, it gave me a very cool end result. Now, the other side of the coin is now you have to figure out how you're going to attach the legs and how you're going to attach the head and that kind of thing. So
right.
There's a little more art involved. I am not an artist. I'm not a sculptor or anything like that. So just by trial and error, I had to figure out, what magnets are powerful enough to hold the legs on.
Oh, that's a cool idea, magnets instead of the rubber.
Yeah. So I chose to use the magnets. I felt it was a pretty robust way to keep a figure that's not going to be played with. It's going to be displayed, right? So there's really no reason for me to, wrench those legs on there with a band. So I wanted more freedom to do what I wanted to do. And it's cool because I can actually, I put my magnets on a certain way so that they're opposite poles, meaning I can switch heads, I can switch legs.
Oh, cool.
And I can, doesn't always work out that way, but if I have a Skeletor head and I want to put it on a Hordak body or something like that, it usually works out pretty good with just swapping the magnets back and forth. So
that's a nice personal touch too, because when it comes to reproductions, there's people who are very terrified of being sold something, or maybe I should say they're more terrified and tormented that someone else will get sold a reproduction and be told it's an original. So if it's clearly your creative artistic take on it with magnets and stuff, then whoever's saying boo to that is very close-minded and just being very silly.
I would agree with that, and I do agree. As far as repros, it's a slippery slope because, let's face it, there are dishonest people out there that are going to try to pull the wool over someone's eyes, and I can understand that some people just don't like repros in general or even customs, but if you're doing it right under the with the right intentions, and like you said, if you can put your own stamp on it to make it look like it wasn't made by the original manufacturer, then I say go for it, and especially with a clear figure. I have a little bit of an issue now because now my figures are being mistaken for a clear Man-at-Arms made by Super 7. So I don't know, maybe they owe me something. This figure is 3 years old, so 2 years old. So I don't know when they started with their clear stuff, but
it was is the recent stuff. I think their new stuff that looks like the vintage style, which comes on the original cards. But some of that stuff looks really cool, which just popped into my mind. Another one of the recent Super 7 customs, and it's kind of funny. They've got the official license, and they're kind of doing what customizers like yourself have been doing for years. So instead of just, here's another Man-at-Arms, this one looks like Filmation. And here's another Tila, this one looks like Filmation. Now they're getting into really interesting ideas, like here's a Crystal Man-at-Arms when he got frozen, and here's a glow-in-the-dark He-Man who's transforming.
Yeah, right.
So have you done any glow-in-the-dark or worked with glow-in-the-dark plastic?
I have, as a matter of fact. In fact, I'm not sure if you can see it in the frame. Let me move here. But this Hordak here, he is actually glow-in-the-dark. And
that's interesting because he's really dark. Usually, like glow-in-the-dark plastic is that light, almost pink or baby blue stuff, right?
Right, and that's another part of the magic of creating these characters, is that there's so many materials out there and things you can do to manipulate your colors. So what I did with that Hordak behind me, he is a dark blue, but he glows a light blue. Cool. So I used a blue glow powder. I bought a kit of glow powder. They came in pretty much every color on the rainbow. But for Hordak, I felt that he needed to be, a darker, more sinister color. So not only did I cast him it's a clear resin tinted with a blue glow-in-the-dark powder, but he also has a black wash paint applied to him.
That's cool.
Yeah, so
that's kind of like the King Grayskull that came out from the classics King Grayskull Ghost Spirit, which adding that black wash it makes it look so much better when it's actually glowing, to have all of the nooks and crannies shaded.
Yep. And again, for anyone listening that cares to hear, any of these figures I'm talking about are on my page. I'm not trying to sell them here.
No, you know what? If you don't want to, I will. Because I'm sure there's some people out there who would love some of these gorgeous looking figures, and the fans these days, if the companies don't do it, the fans will. Biggest case in point, Star Wars, the despecialized editions. If the company that owns this stuff won't put it out, the fans went ahead and did it. So you got some beautiful figures, and if the companies that own these rights don't feel like doing it or don't think it'll be profitable, well, they might be right. I mean, maybe 1 million people won't buy them, but that doesn't mean 1,000 people shouldn't have them that want them. So I do want to throw that out there and just say, if people are interested in some of these customs, visit RetroToyPile or on Instagram or Facebook. And I got to bring up price range because, people... price is a big thing for me and for a lot of my friends. What kind of price ranges are we looking at? Keeping in mind, folks, that a lot of time and effort, research, heartbreak sometimes, the Horde Troopers, sometimes cost of, goes into these. But what kind of price range are you looking at?
Well, I'll tell you the prices that I've sold them for. So the Crystal He-Man behind me, he'd sell for $75 as he is. He'll come with a sword, or typically I throw in an extra couple of weapons because there's always resin left over, so I always fill some extra molds and that kind of thing. I don't charge any more for the glow in the dark or anything like that. The Horde Trooper, however, he sells for $110. And I let the market actually set that price, because when I put it took me about a month to create all those molds. And like I said, destroying 3 Horde Troopers to get those molds. I said, you know what, if the world doesn't want this thing for what I'm asking, I'm just going to make an army of them and keep them for myself.
Are they painted?
No, I don't paint anything, except for a black wash, because that's easy. I mean, you can screw up a black wash and it looks like you meant to do it.
Right.
But I choose to color all my resin. I just feel like I feel the end result is much cleaner.
So they are colored.
For me.
They are colored. They're just not painted.
Correct.
Yeah, that's awesome. It won't wear off. So that's one of the little annoyances that I have when I like to handle my stuff, and the more you handle it, the more the paint comes off, or the stickers or whatever. So sometimes we as collectors feel like, don't touch it, you'll ruin it. And I think that's really awesome. That's reassuring, sets the mind at ease to know that the color is in there for good. It's permanent, and you can pose it all you want.
Yeah, it's not going to fade or anything like that. And as I said, I know the Horde Trooper is a tough pill to swallow, over $100. But
what does a real one cost, though?
I mean, if you were buying a real, complete Horde Trooper, the going rate on average is about $115 complete. I have several of them in my collection that I've paid close to that. But as far as making a custom, I mean, to me, a lot of collectors want something that they don't have, or something that someone else doesn't have. I mean, because I have every Masters of the Universe figure that I could ever want, except for the laser figures and stuff, just because that's way out of my price range. But when you're somebody who has everything that everyone else has, then hey, you might want that crystal clear pink Horde Trooper, or the blue one, or a crystal clear He-Man or something like that. And that's kind of why I do it. I don't really do it to make the money, because believe me, I'm upside down on the Horde Troopers as it is. But I've sold probably 5 of them now. And if I made more, I'm sure they'd sell too. I just don't. I mean, you could probably see from my Instagram page, I don't just make figures and post them for sale. I make them, and I might post them saying, "Hey, look what I made," that kind of thing. And people just kind of send me messages and say, "Hey, can you do this?" or "Hey, I'd like to buy it," and we kind of go from there. I don't use it as a springboard to hawk my customs or anything. That's not what it's for. But
I think it's very, very obvious who's out for the money and who's out for the love, and maybe, a little bit of, hey, it would be nice to be able to make a little money so that I could do more of this stuff for myself and for other fans alike. I don't think for people who are perceptive, I don't think it's hard to distinguish. I mean, coming from YouTube myself, I just see some channels, not talking about toy channels in particular, but I see some channels who will do a video on a certain topic, and I just think to myself, I would never turn the monetization on for that type of topic. And then I see other people doing it and then have like ads throughout the whole thing. And maybe I've even done something about, like a serious topic or trying to help people. And I've just never been able to turn the ads, or tribute to someone who just passed away. I've never been able to turn the ads on a video like that. I can't do it. There's other things where it kind of pains me to do it, but I'm thinking, gotta pay those bills. So sometimes I turn it on, like a history video. I would love to not have any ads on anything ever, but I think, hey, you know what? If I put it on, 5 seconds isn't a big deal to anybody, and I get to keep doing this, and I get to make the next one. I get to make the next history of Masters of the Universe. So it's a small price to pay, but I think that's awesome what you're doing. And I think anyone who complains, that's a wonderful opportunity to exercise the block, mentality of what is not for you is against you. You need to get rid of it, because it won't go away on its own. Those people will not come to their senses or go, well, you know what? I should stop bothering you. If I can't help you, I shouldn't bother you. They're not going to do it. You're going to have to do it for them. So I think your prices are absolutely, fair for the effort and craftsmanship and artistry that you put in them. And I'm pretty much exhausted and tired trying to explain to people, you should just walk on if you don't like it. So they won't. So they need to be dealt with permanently, so that you don't have to endure that every couple of weeks from the same person.
Right. And I will, just to add to that, I think you go down the road of, the negativity in the toy community. We've seen it. We've all seen it. We've seen the Facebook pages and, people that just like to complain about things that they really can't control, or there's really no reason to complain about it at all. But I will say, on Instagram, I've been doing this since 2015. As we talked about earlier, I have quite a few followers, and I've never once encountered anyone on Instagram, any one of my followers or anyone commenting on my post. I don't think I've seen any negativity, and that's what I like about what I'm doing, because I don't feel like I'm giving anyone a reason to step up to the plate and say, hey, I don't like that, or because they're toys, right? I mean, they're for me. The reason I started collecting toys to begin with was to bring back those awesome, memories from when I was a kid. I mean, those were the days where we had no responsibility. We had nothing to worry about. Just, what kind of, what was I going to stuff in my lunchbox the next day to go to school? That was our only, we had nothing to worry about. And so our toys that was our life. So now as an adult, I like to look at a shelf with, He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercats, and, all of those memories just come flooding back. So there is no room for negativity. And I think you really have to, you have to go looking for it. And, not to knock any Facebook pages or anything like that, because there's so many great Facebook communities and toy communities, but I've had to leave several pages just because I get upset when I see some of the comments, and hey,
even if it's nothing to do with you, just the man's inhumanity to man, to use a Gordon Soley term.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you want to step in and just kind of say, hey, but then now it's going to turn into a back and forth. You might look like a jerk. People are going to take side, and
there's no winning.
There's no winning, and so I just choose not to say anything, and so I've left several groups because of that. And I'm not very active on Facebook. I said that earlier. I prefer the Instagram platform, but I'm sort of a lurker, I guess you'd say, on
Yeah.
Facebook. I like to keep up with what people are talking about and that kind of thing, but I don't really get involved in the conversations. And, because it bums me out, a lot of them, and again, I'm not saying every Facebook page. So I know there's some people saying my page is awesome, and you've had a lot of people on this podcast that you've turned me on to their pages, and I'm glad you have, because I'm like, hey, this Centurions fan page is
Nick's page.
awesome.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that existed, mainly because I wasn't looking for it. But I heard your podcast and I went and checked it out, and it's awesome. I love what he's doing over there. So good for him.
And I really wanted to give that one a shout out because it's a group, not a page. So you have to request to join, and sometimes those those groups that you have to join, you have to answer a few questions. So it's a little bit of weeding out, are you looking for trouble, or do you actually love this stuff? Do you know who Ace McLeod is, or something like that? So I find on Facebook, the groups are generally the fun ones. And then if there is someone who, like, if I'll post a picture to one of the groups or something, the majority is always awesome. It's just always that one little fly in the ointment that you can't waste your time on. Exactly. And rather than responding to them and saying, hey, even saying that's not cool or mind your manners, there's no point, because you're going to get a witty zinger back and they burned you and they owned you and all that. You're best off to just block them. Block that profile of that person on Facebook, and you just did them the favor of they'll never have to put up with you again. That's the way I look at it. Look, I'm an irritant to these, in my opinion, miserable people, but to try to look at it from their side, I'm an irritant to them. I rock their boat, and now you'll never have your boat rocked by me again. Well, we're totally separate. But I do agree, Instagram, of all the social media, is so much more upbeat and positive than, like, definitely Twitter. Twitter is like the place where you go and argue and fight and just throw zingers at each other. Facebook has a lot of wonderful people too, but you get some really vile stuff on YouTube comments. But Instagram just seems, I don't know why, maybe because it's more of a visual, take a picture and share, rather than, everyone's really brave and smart and witty when they've got two sentences to share. But Instagram has always been really fun and upbeat. So whoever's behind that, like, keep it up.
I agree. It's definitely my social media of choice. It's the only one I'm really active on, and I love it. I mean, where else can you take a photo of a dusty, dirty action figure that you pulled out of a dollar bin at a flea market and say, "Hey, look, everyone, look what I got."
And people won't say you're lying or whatever.
Right. Say why you post a stupid toy, and that's another reason why when I was on Facebook in the early days, you get all your friends from high school that you haven't seen in 15, 20 years, whatever, and then you get all your family members and stuff. And it's like, well, and coworkers, do I really, am I posting action figures? Like, do they want to see that? They want to see that just as much as I want to see their kids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
that's true.
It got to the point where, to all my friends, not that I don't care about your kids, it's just one of those, I think you know where I'm going with that,
Yeah.
So I said, you know what, I'm going to go over to Instagram. I'm going to create a page that has nothing to do with, my personal life, other than toys, and every now and then I do post a picture on my story, about my dogs, or, the construction going on in my house right now, or something like that, just to kind of let people know where, I'm out there and I'm alive.
You're not a robot, like
I'm not a robot.
Internet bots.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I posted my dogs several times, either with the toys or something like that. But you're not going to see wedding photos or, that kind of thing on there. So,
yeah, when I started my Instagram, it was just, I put my name on it, and I took pictures of my dog, and I took pictures of my, out to lunch, just getting sushi with my wife, and, I took nature pictures. Here's a bird and here's the river, and I love that stuff. And I didn't care if there wasn't a big response to it. That's not why I was doing Instagram. It was more for me. It was my own little visual diary. and
Sure.
did that for quite some time. And wow, that's kind of cool. 2 people like this picture, and you know, that's awesome. Wow, you know, who's this person? And so then you find hashtags, and you put a couple hashtags. Oh, river and water, and then you overdo it. You know, when you start to learn about hashtags, you put 100 of them.
Yep.
But it was interesting.
I'm guilty of that.
That's how you get them out there. And and then when I started doing the toy videos, I remembered as a kid I would take this stuff out, especially G.I. Joes or Rambo, take him out there and take pictures at, you know, in the elements. And so many more people were seeing them, and I thought, oh, that's weird. It's the same picture of the river, but this one's got a Transformer or a G.I. Joe, and all of a sudden, cool. And you know what? I thought it was cooler too. Like if I compare the pictures, I go, that one is cooler with the G.I. Joe. So there's something to it. I mean, the nature surroundings bring the life out of the toy, and the toy brings fun and excitement to the surroundings. And I think they'll just work together very well.
Yep, agreed. And I mean, you know, when we were kids, we brought our toys everywhere, and that was part of the enjoyment. I mean, especially when you're, you know, 5, 6, 7 years old, and your parents take you to see, you know, a waterfall or something like that. I mean, it's so much more enjoyable when you got your toys there. You know what I mean? You know, I can remember stuffing G.I. Joes in my lunchbox, and you know, and I'd bring them to, you know, if I went to church with my grandmother or something like that, I'd always bring my Battle Beasts or something small enough that I could hide in my pocket. Yeah. You know, and you just had that, you know, that element of adventure, you know, in the palm of your hand, no matter where you were.
Please tell me while you were in church, you were singing the theme song, Battle Beasts, battle for the fun of it in church.
I think I was under the pews, you know, playing with my toys, just kind of getting dirty down there. But
wood beats fire, or wood beats water. Wood beats water. The pews are wood.
Yeah, playing with in the holy water with the. You know.
It's water beats fire.
Yeah. But no, it was a you know, great time, and I feel like as adults, you know, anyone that's part of the toy community, I think, can appreciate, you know, those kinds of moments that you had. My wife and we went to Hawaii a couple of years ago, and I brought some adventure people and battle beasts with me. And you know, so sure enough, we were out there, you know, on this 2-week vacation, and you know, they're actually on my Instagram page. Icky Iguana. I brought him to a volcano, like a lava tour. Mm-hmm. And once we got out to the part where there was actually flowing lava, I was able to set him up about 2 feet away from the hot flowing lava. Holy and smokes. I had a group of people, and then I was down on my hands and knees trying to take a really awesome photo of Icky Iguana from Battle Beasts. And you know, here's, you know, all of these people that were on the same tour that we were, they're looking at me like, what's this guy doing? This grown man, he's setting up his action figures on hot lava, and he's getting down on his hands and knees to take photos. And my wife was fully on board. She's like, oh, that's going to be a great photo, you know. And I did the same thing with I forget the character's name. I think it was Dick from the Adventure People. He was the climber, the mountain climber. I posed him on some rocks and trees and things like that, and I just had a great time. And it was, you know, I can remember doing stuff like that when I was a kid, and that's what it's all about.
That's where technology. Did the Battle Beast melt?
No. I was a little concerned with that, but he was on. You know, once lava crusts over, which is actually fascinating because it was my first time in Hawaii, first experience with lava at all. But once it actually has that black crust, within a minute you can actually stand on that crust. Really? Wow. Yeah. Not that I would recommend you do that, but right. But it's hard enough so that you won't fall through, but it cools that quickly. So, you know, like I said, I was probably a few feet away, and you can feel the physical heat, but it wasn't enough. I mean, I'm sure if I left him there for a good amount of time, he would have, you know, melted right into the rock. But it was fine.
And I can attest to that. Technology these days, the wonderful thing about it is everyone has a really, really high power, high definition camera. It used to be you needed one of those cameras with a lens this long. Right. And for the podcast listeners, I'm holding my hands a couple feet away. But the big telescopic thing, and you had to get the little, I don't even know what they're called, the thing around your neck that you check. And Now
Oh yeah,
you just take your phone and take a picture, and people go, "Holy smokes, what is that? A $2,000 camera?" Well,
yeah,
sort of. It's a iPad. It's a tablet.
sure, yeah,
But like on the flip side of the elements, I have that same type of fun going into the tundras here, into the giant snow fields when we get the big snowfalls, taking the snow joes and any other snow toy. Now, unfortunately, there isn't really a winter transformer. There aren't really winter He-Man figures. I got the snowman at Hook Mountain.
okay,
That's
yeah,
one of the few non GI Joe snow guys that I can take out. But that is really fun, just hoofing it through the snow field and setting a guy up, and and ice is blasting into your eyes, and you're trying to protect whatever you're using for pictures, and
sure,
you get those pictures that most people don't want to bother.
right,
They think, forget it. What's the point? And the point is to get that picture and to get it up and make people go, wow. And
right,
then maybe they'll pick up their iceberg figure or their Arctic stalker and look at it, and it might just be in their hand in their house, not a big deal, but a little bit of that magic that you brought to that in the surrounding you put them in, and all the stuff you put up with to get that picture is no different than those old catalogs where they took pictures of the toys in front of a volcano or on a beach somewhere.
right.
So I think that's what really brings some life back to these toys, these awesome photographers that go out and take these pictures in these not easy to reach settings.
Right. I absolutely agree with that. And that's another reason why I'm in love with Instagram, because there are so many great toy photographers, I should say, on Instagram. I mean, there's a lot of people that they really take it to the next level. I mean, like I said, I play around and I might get 50 shots before I get a good one that I'm going to post. One of the accounts that I really am hooked on is Nose Rain. Nose as in on your face, rain as in what falls from the sky. One word.
Okay.
And as far as his toy photography is next level. I mean, you look at the photo, and it almost looks like it's a real life photo. And he'll actually post the in-process photos. So you swipe to the left, and you can actually see how he set everything up. And a lot of times you'd be surprised because he's on a wood floor. He doesn't even have a studio lamp. He might have a house lamp or something like that, just positioned in the right place.
Wow.
He uses the atmosphere smoke on some of the shots, and it just goes to show you that you're really putting a lot of thought into the shot is a lot more beneficial than the equipment, I think. Don't get me wrong, having great lights, having a great camera, having a great tripod, that kind of thing will definitely help you out. But if you can get creative with it, you'd be surprised. Case in point, the Mate Mylar that you interviewed.
I was just going to mention him
a few weeks ago, and thank you for that, because you also turned me on to his page. But that is a great case in point too, if you want to turn your listeners to another great toy photography site page is Mate Mylar. He's awesome.
Yeah, that stuff needs to be, if there's a reissue series of G.I. Joe, his picture should be on the box.
Absolutely.
Or at least on the back of the box, on the card. That guy really has brought that original boxing card art to life in a way that no one ever has, ever. Like, how often can you say that's never been done before? And he went and did it. Just amazing.
And it's next level stuff too. I mean, if I hadn't listened to your podcast with him on it, just looking at his photos, I'd still be stumped as to how he got those effects. But now that he kind of touched on some of the materials he uses in the process, I can see exactly how he did it now, and it's even more fascinating. It's almost like, I don't want to say the mystery's gone, but now that it's kind of like when the magician tells you how he did a trick, and you're like, wow.
Then you appreciate the actual
the art form,
coordination of it, and the imagination of it.
Yeah, it's almost unbelievable. It's like you pulled the curtain out from the wizard, but the magic is still there, and it's unbelievable. So, good for him. I mean,
I'm looking at some of the nose rain pictures, and they are beautiful. I love the one of the Mandalorian walking away from the DeLorean, which is
so good.
so clever. Mandalorian, DeLorean, and also it's not just that they sound alike. The Mandalorian makes me feel like I just got in a DeLorean and it hit 88 miles per hour and it's 1983 or 84. That show is just a total time warp. And I love the Netflix Punisher. So the little picture of good old Pete Castiglione with his little puppy, the Vader. Yep. Yeah, just beautiful use of lighting.
They're incredible.
Real like emotion out of these little plastic toys, right? That you wouldn't think is there, but he sees it, and with his settings, his environments, and his lighting, he shows us that it's there. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So definitely check out Nose Rain for sure.
What was your favorite toy growing up?
Still is Masters of the Universe.
Yeah.
Yep. Always been my drug of choice, and although I do collect several different toy lines. If I had to throw them all in the trash tomorrow, Masters of the Universe would be the only ones that would stay. Do
you like the Super 7 vintage style? Or are they moving in on your encroaching on your territory?
I mean, I don't want to poo-poo on anything because I do appreciate any life that gets breathed back into a toy line. So I definitely appreciate that.
It's because it's almost a reissue line, almost.
They're almost reissues, and here's the thing.
It's like a reissue of the thing that never came out but should have.
Right.
Like a prototype, kind of like Hero.
Right, and you almost wonder if the Masters of the Universe line didn't discontinue, if those figures would have come out, and they probably would have. So I really do like what Super 7 is doing. I'm not a fan of the classics. I'm not a fan of the reaction stuff. Not because I don't like what they're doing, but just because for me, when I pick up a toy, it has to spark a memory. Mm-hmm. And I know there are toy collectors, I know there are toy enthusiasts, and I know there are toy fans, and they're all different. They're not just people who collect toys. I feel like everyone kind of falls into somewhat of a category. For me, I only collect what I remember having as a kid, and I try to scope my collection to that, because for me it's very nostalgic. When I pick up, even recently I got a Chuck Norris Corvette. Chuck Norris is not a very popular toy line, but I remember having those as a kid, and I actually have a picture of me with my Chuck Norris Corvette as a kid. So for me, having that Corvette is magical. If Super 7 came out with a new Chuck Norris Corvette, I wouldn't buy it because I didn't own that one when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I approach toy collecting now. That said, I do have the Super 7 Hero, as you saw on my feed, and that's because there are certain characters that I've always wanted to own but just never did. And Hero was, in fact, a prototype.
Yeah.
We never got him. So Super 7 did a wonderful job on the vintage style, so I did pick him up.
It was one of the few prototypes that a lot of people got to see, too. Like, the image was released, and he was hinted at in some of the mini comics, so it's not like we never knew this thing was supposed to come out.
Right.
We kind of knew about it, and then we're just left hanging. The little... Super 7 reaction figures, I wasn't interested in those at all, and if for people who like them, I would never discourage them, but sure. I got a couple of them thrown in little blind boxes thrown in with the Masters in the Universe skateboard. So open them up, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like you, like I need to hold it in my hand to really tell if there's anything special there.
Right.
And I've held some reaction figures like in the store in Toys R Us of like a Big Trouble in Little China, Jack Burton, which is like, it's kind of cool, but it's not like, oh my God, I have to have it. And a couple of the other reaction figures, like that's, the Xenomorph or something like that, Ripley.
Sure.
Okay, neat. but not got to have it. I got to tell you, when I got that Merman and Tila Super 7 reaction figures, I was like, wow, these are cool. Like these are nothing like I had as a kid, but they're a blend. Like it's a blend of that old Merman figure and a Star Wars vintage figure. And I was kind of feeling it. I was like, I wouldn't mind getting a few more of these. This actually, now that I have it in my hand and I'm playing around with it, like that's better than the pictures really gave it credit. But it's a thing that I had to actually have in my hand and play around with it to tell that.
Right. You had to feel something to really appreciate it. And that's how I feel about toys. And I don't turn my nose up to any toy line or any type of toy collection or anything like that. It's just, again, for me, my preference has to be, it's got to be something.
Yeah.
And as far as the Masters of the Universe Classics line, the only two that I own are Titus and Megator, because again, we didn't have those here in the U.S. when I was a kid. I remember seeing them, seeing pictures of them, but much like Hero, the rug was pulled out from under us. We didn't get them. And they're way too expensive for me as a collector to even own. I mean, I have to put some kind of, price limit on some of the things that I buy here. Yeah. So I can't pay $2 or $3 grand for an action figure that's going to go on the shelf. So I loved what Mattel did with the Classics line for those two figures. So that's what I got.
Yeah. What do you think of the New Adventures He-Man line?
I was never into New Adventures of He-Man. I don't think I had one figure when I was a kid.
Yeah, me neither.
Which I'm not mad about, because I don't like that toy line at all.
Yeah, I remember seeing it on the shelves, hanging in front of the pegs, and going, from a distance, what, He-Man? Because there was no commercials or no warning, like He-Man's back, and then seeing it, that's not He-Man. What is this?
Yeah.
So
it was too far from the original line for me. That it was just far enough from the original line to the Plus, I was getting older at the time. I had moved on. I think Ninja Turtles was around, and I was heavily into Ninja Turtles at that time. So
and Transformers was winding down. G.I. Joe wasn't what it used to be. It was almost a completely different toy line, just G.I. Joe in name. So it was just like there were so many factors in those like late 80s, early 90s. Just if you grew up on toys, there were lots of reasons to get away from toys. Because what you grew up on wasn't there anymore. It was gone. The cartoons were being canceled. The comics were ending. And it was just, everything was telling you, move on. Like, if you won't move on, we'll make you move on.
Right.
Because there was nowhere to buy vintage toys. There was no eBay and, flea markets. You're right. We're really guaranteed. So we're at an hour here, about an hour. And one thing I wanted to wrap up with is, what are some of your future projects? And one idea I wanted to throw out there, going back to that glow-in-the-dark Super 7 He-Man, the Transformation He-Man. Yeah. Which is cool to have a glow-in-the-dark figure, but it's like He-Man doesn't completely glow one color. Like he's got an outer glow, but so that glow-in-the-dark figure, it looks awesome. I'd love to have it someday. But I'm wondering if they could do something like the Crystal He-Man you have, or if you could do this. Actually, I'm throwing this idea out to you, maybe. Like a see-through Crystal He-Man with a little bit of coloration to make him still look like he's got the color where he should be, but with like some sort of sparkling, swirling, I don't know, some kind of sparkle dust all throughout him to give him, especially when the light hits him, that, explosive power of Grayskull sparkle.
Okay. I will say that there is a customizer who does fantastic work, who's actually made, I think he named it Phasing He-Man, whereas half of the figure is painted like the original figure, and the other half is it's like a yellow, glittery type effect. Okay. And it's probably one of the best customs I've ever seen. It's a Master English. Okay. He can be found on Facebook. We don't know each other. Him and I have never really, spoken or anything like that. We've never traded ideas or anything like that, but I will give credit where it's due. He is definitely one of the customizers that, I've looked at all of his figures and I've taken a lot of inspiration, but that phasing He-Man is something special. I think he's actually done Horde Troopers too, but you'd be impressed with the customs that he did. But yeah, that's definitely an awesome idea. I actually thought about doing a glow-in-the-dark He-Man with like a glow paint wash, so that it would actually have a different color glow. You know what I mean? So
cool.
But I suppose you could do some, because I've added glitter to resin. I have some figures that I've done glitter and stuff like that. But it's definitely that's the beauty of it, because you can do whatever you want. You know, I mean, if you want to, fill the thing with Skittles, you can do that. There's so many things that you can do. It's awesome.
And what are you working on now? Any like ideas coming up?
Well, the one actually, sorry, I went out of the frame. The last thing I finished up is this is it's a translucent Grayskull door.
Wow.
And it will fit. I think I have some photos on my Instagram page. I actually put this on my my Grayskull. It's fully functional. It's actually one piece. So again, this was one of those where I had to destroy a couple of different Grayskull doors to get it right. I originally split the original door in half so that I could make it exactly the way it was made originally. But I ultimately realized that if I just made it one solid resin piece, it was going to look that much better, and it did. So I'm glad I did it.
That would look beautiful on a Grayskull with a light in it, like one of those little IKEA lights. Even maybe one of those lights that you can change the color of it.
Yes.
Because I love the idea of adding electronics to some vintage play sets, but it's hard with a lot of them. And what would you do with Grayskull? I don't want to drill the eyes out or anything like that.
Sure.
And actually having light coming out while the door is up, that would look really awesome.
One of the stories on my Instagram page, the highlights at the top of the page, there's one called Glass Door, and it actually is a picture of my Grayskull, but I put a candle behind it. So you got the flickering effect. It looks really cool. So you should, everyone should head over to the to RetroToyPile's Instagram page and check that out.
Absolutely.
So.
RetroToyPile on Instagram and on Facebook as well. Jared, thank you so much for chatting today. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
Love hearing about all of the creativity that goes into it, not just as a fan, but as a creator of this stuff too. So yeah, I just had a blast chatting with you, and hopefully first of many.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thanks everyone out there for watching and listening. Have a great day. Nerdmas Day.